Ladies and gentlemen, you ever stood at the edge of your life, looked around, and felt like it was over, like you've done all you can, prayed all the prayers, fought all the fights, and still nothing moved? Let me tell you something, that place right there, that dead end, that's where God does his best work. See, man's limit is God's beginning. You say you're out of strength. Good. Now he can be your strength. You say the doors are shut. Good. Now he can open the one no man can close. You thought the road was finished. Nah, God doesn't do dead ends. He builds bridges where people see cliffs. He makes highways through deserts, turns tombstones into testimonies. But you gotta trust him, not just when it's easy, not just when the bills are paid and the sun's shining, but when it's dark, when it's cold, when it feels like he's silent, because faith ain't tested on the mountaintop. It's forged in the valley. It's when everything in you says give up, and something greater in you says get up. That's where God moves. You may not see the way, you may not feel the way, but I promise you, he is the way. So if you're standing at the end of your rope tonight, tie a knot, hold on, because just beyond your breaking point is your breakthrough. God will make a way, not maybe, not hopefully, he will, even when you're at the end of the road. Keep the faith, don't stop walking, and let him lead you home. Obstacles are often seen as barriers, as if they're signs that we've gone the wrong way or that we should stop trying. But what if I told you the very thing standing in your way is the thing preparing you for the blessing ahead? Life has a strange way of testing your patience, your faith, and your commitment. And those tests rarely come when you're ready. They come when you're vulnerable, when your resources are low, when your energy is drained. But in those very moments, something divine is happening. The obstacle isn't the end, it's a setup for your breakthrough. Think about the times when you've faced your hardest moments. Maybe it was a financial crisis, a painful breakup, a job loss, or a personal failure. In those moments, you felt like everything was falling apart. You questioned yourself, maybe even questioned God. Why me? Why now? Why this? But looking back, if you really reflect, you'll see something deeper. You didn't just go through it, you grew through it. That obstacle forced you to think differently, to adapt, to dig deeper into who you really are. And that growth, that shift, that was the setup. We often look for progress in the form of smooth sailing. We think success should come wrapped in ease and comfort. But comfort doesn't create champions. Pressure does. Struggle does. Resistance builds strength. Diamonds are created under pressure. Gold is refined by fire. You can't develop patience if you're never forced to wait. You can't grow faith if you're never put in a position where you have to trust in the unseen. The very nature of a breakthrough demands that something must first be broken. That could be your pride. That could be your routine. That could be your limited thinking. Something has to shift. See, obstacles are often divine disruptions. They are redirections that push you out of what's familiar into what's necessary. You might have been too comfortable in your last season. Maybe you got used to the job, the relationship, the rhythm of life, even if it wasn't right for you. So what does God do? He allows something to interrupt that comfort. He shakes the ground you stand on, not to destroy you, but to rebuild you, to make you ready for what's next. When you're facing an obstacle, it doesn't feel like opportunity. It feels like failure. It feels like rejection. But so often, rejection is actually protection. A closed door might hurt, but it also saves you from walking into something that would have damaged you more. And while you're grieving what you lost, God is already preparing what you're about to gain. That delay, that detour, it's not random. It's designed. It's a divine holding pattern meant to develop you. Look at anyone who's done something meaningful, and you'll find a trail of obstacles in their past. Not one of them got there without resistance. Moses had a speech problem. David was overlooked. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers and thrown into prison. Ruth lost everything, and Jesus, he was rejected by the very people he came to save. Every great story has tension, has a turning point where it seems like all is lost. That's the moment before the breakthrough, but here's the key. You can't quit in the middle. Too many people stop right before the shift happens. They give up one prayer too soon, they walk away one day too early, and they never get to see what was waiting on the other side. The enemy knows he can't stop God's plan, so he tries to stop you from believing in it. He uses fear, discouragement, and delay to convince you that the obstacle is the end, but that's the lie. The truth is, the obstacle is the beginning of a new version of you. Every challenge you face is an invitation to rise. It's a test to see how much you believe in what's possible, and often God will allow circumstances to stretch your faith to its absolute limit, just to show you that He's bigger than whatever you're facing. He wants to prove not just to you, but through you, that miracles still happen. That breakthrough is possible, but it doesn't come when you're comfortable. It comes when you press through the discomfort, the doubt, the uncertainty. Think about the butterfly. Before it can fly, it has to struggle in the cocoon. That struggle builds the strength it needs to fly. If someone tried to help it out of the cocoon early, it wouldn't be able to survive. It's the resistance that prepares it for freedom. In the same way, your struggle is not senseless. It's sacred. It's shaping something in you that ease never could. The pressure is molding you. The delay is humbling you. The disappointment is deepening your wisdom. It's easy to celebrate the breakthrough, but few people talk about the process that leads up to it. It's lonely, it's hard, it's full of uncertainty, but it's also sacred, because that's where God meets you. In the dark places, in the silent nights, in the tears no one else sees, He sees it, and He's using it. He's setting you up for something greater than what you can imagine, and the beauty of it all. When you finally do break through, you'll look back at that obstacle and realize it wasn't there to block you. It was there to build you. It was never in the way. It was part of the way. It made you stronger. Wiser, more compassionate, more prepared, and now, because you didn't give up, you're ready to step into what's next, not because it was easy, but because you endured. So when you face obstacles, don't panic. Don't shrink. Don't assume it's the end. It might just be the start of something greater, because sometimes the biggest blessings come wrapped in the most painful packages. And when God is setting you up for a breakthrough, He doesn't need your understanding. He needs your trust. So keep going, keep believing. That obstacle is not the end. It's the preparation ground for something extraordinary. Faith is not something that thrives in certainty. It doesn't grow in the places where everything makes sense, where every detail is visible and every outcome is predictable. Faith is born in the dark. It breathes in the unknown. It rises when sight fails. That's why we say faith begins where sight ends, because it's only when we can no longer rely on what we see that we start to depend on what we believe. And that's where real power lies, not in what you can explain, but in what you're willing to trust without proof. When life is clear, when the path is visible and the direction seems straight, we don't really need faith. We move with confidence because we think we know what's coming next. But when that road disappears, when the light fades, when the plans fall apart, that's when the true test of faith begins. It's easy to believe when you're standing on solid ground. But what about when everything beneath you is shaking? What about when the answers don't come, when the healing hasn't happened, when the door stays closed? That's the moment where sight ends, and for most people, that's where they stop. They panic, they give up, they wait until they can see again. But faith doesn't wait for sight. It walks anyway. It moves forward even when the road is covered in fog, because faith isn't dependent on the physical. It's grounded in the spiritual. It's not about what your eyes can confirm, but about what your heart knows to be true. The challenge is that we live in a world that celebrates logic, data, and proof. We're taught to believe only what we can see. Show me the results, give me the evidence, let me analyze the facts. And while that may work in science or business, it doesn't work in matters of the soul, because some of the most powerful movements in your life will begin with no evidence at all. You'll be called to take a step when there's no visible staircase. You'll be asked to believe in promises that haven't yet come to pass. And in that tension between uncertainty and trust, faith is either forged or forgotten. Think about the people in history and scripture who made a lasting impact. Abraham was told to leave his homeland without knowing where he was going. Moses stood at the edge of the Red Sea with Pharaoh behind him and no way forward. Peter stepped out of the boat onto water, not knowing if he would sink or stand. None of them had sight. All they had was a word, a whisper from God that said, "Go," or "Trust me," or "Don't be afraid." They didn't see the outcome. They didn't know the details, but they moved anyway. That's faith. There will be moments in your life when you have to walk with no map, when the GPS fails and your vision is blurred by tears, fear, or disappointment. You'll pray, and it'll feel like silence. You'll ask for signs, and none will come. That's where most people stop. But if you can push through that silence, if you can still move, still believe, still hope, then you're not walking by sight anymore. You're walking by faith, and that walk will lead you to places sight never could. The truth is, sight can be deceiving. What looks impossible through human eyes is often perfectly aligned in God's timing. You may see a dead end, He sees a new beginning. You may see a delay, He sees development. You may see failure, He sees formation. Sight is limited, it only captures what is. Faith reaches into what could be. Sight is bound by logic. Faith moves by grace, and grace doesn't follow human timelines. It doesn't require your understanding, only your obedience, and sometimes faith looks like foolishness to others and even to yourself. You'll feel crazy for believing in something that hasn't happened, for hoping in a promise you can't prove. People will question your decisions. They'll mock your convictions. They'll ask, why would you keep trying? Why do you still believe? And the only answer you'll have is, because I know who God is. And even if I can't see the way, I know He's still working. A faith doesn't mean you won't feel fear. It doesn't mean you'll never doubt. It just means you won't let those things stop you. You'll keep moving through them. Faith is the courage to take one more step when you don't know what's ahead. It's the strength to keep praying even when heaven is quiet. It's the audacity to praise even when you're still in pain. That kind of faith shakes the heavens. It unlocks the supernatural. It's not soft or passive, it's bold. It's gritty. It holds on when everything else says let go. There's something powerful that happens when you decide to trust God in the dark. It changes you. It deepens your character. It builds your endurance. It teaches you to walk, not by what you see, but by who you know Him to be. And in that process, you become someone who isn't swayed by circumstances. You become rooted, anchored, unshakable, not because life got easier, but because your faith got stronger. You begin to realize that sight will always have limits, but faith has none. Sight says, I'll believe it when I see it. Faith says, I believe it even when I don't. Sight waits for confirmation. Faith moves on conviction. Sight is powered by evidence. Faith is powered by trust. And in the kingdom of God, it is faith, not sight, that moves mountains. You may not know how, you may not know when, but if you can keep believing, even when there's nothing to see, you will discover a strength you didn't know you had. You'll find that God was never late and you were never alone, because even when you couldn't see the path, He was still lighting the way. He was guiding every step, shaping every moment, preparing every blessing. Faith is not the absence of uncertainty. It is the choice to move forward in spite of it. It's the quiet confidence that even when everything looks unclear, something beautiful is still unfolding. You may not see it now, but one day you'll look back and realize, the moment you ran out of sight, that's the moment you truly began to walk by faith. Delay is not denial. It's a phrase that sounds simple, but when you're in the middle of waiting, it can feel like a lie. When your prayers go unanswered, when your dreams remain unfulfilled, and when time keeps ticking with no visible progress, it's easy to confuse the silence of God with the absence of God, but there's a difference. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to. Delay doesn't mean you've been forgotten. It doesn't mean the promise has been cancelled. Sometimes it just means the timing isn't right. Life doesn't always move on our schedule. We live in a culture of instant gratification, where everything is expected to happen quickly. We want answers now, results now, success now. But God's timing is not dictated by our impatience. He doesn't operate on human clocks. He sees the full picture, past, present, and future, while we only see what's in front of us. What feels like a delay to us might be divine alignment in progress. When we experience delay, we often feel discouraged. We start to question everything, our calling, our choices, even our worth. If the relationship hasn't come, if the breakthrough hasn't arrived, if the healing hasn't happened, we assume maybe it never will. But delay is not a sign that the answer is no. It's often a sign that something deeper is being developed. There's a process taking place beneath the surface, something that can't be rushed or forced. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. A seed planted in the ground doesn't sprout overnight. It takes time, it needs the right conditions, the right season, the right environment. If you dug it up too soon to check on its progress, you'd kill what was growing. In the same way, when God allows delay, it's not to hurt you. It's to grow you. It's to mature your character, refine your motives, and build your endurance. Sometimes you're not waiting for the blessing. The blessing is waiting for you to be ready. There's a story being written, and delay is a part of the plot. Look at the people who were used mightily in history and scripture. Joseph had a dream as a teenager, but he didn't step into his destiny until years later, after betrayal, slavery, and prison. David was anointed king, but went back to tending sheep, and didn't take the throne until much later. Even Jesus waited 30 years before beginning his public ministry. None of these delays were wasted. Each one served a purpose. Each one shaped the person needed for the promise. The waiting season is often a proving ground. It's where your faith is tested and your resilience is formed. It's easy to believe when everything is going your way, but what about when everything feels stuck? When you've done all you can and still nothing moves? That's where you find out what kind of faith you really have. Faith that's based only on outcomes is fragile, but faith that endures through silence, through struggle, through delay, that's real faith. That's faith that can carry you into your purpose. Delay teaches you how to surrender. It breaks down your illusion of control. It forces you to let go of your timeline and trust God's. That's not always comfortable. In fact, it can be incredibly painful, but in that pain there is transformation. You start to release your need to make things happen and start to rest in the knowledge that God is working, even when you can't see it. The delay becomes a season of intimacy, of drawing closer to the one who holds your future. Sometimes the delay is protection. There are doors you wanted to walk through that weren't right for you. There are people you wanted to stay connected to who would have drained your energy or diverted your calling. And while you mourn the closed door, God was saving you from something you didn't even know was coming. His delay is often a form of mercy. What feels like rejection is actually redirection. What feels like being held back is really him pulling you back to launch you further. Delay also builds gratitude. When the promise finally comes, you'll appreciate it more deeply because you had to wait for it. You won't take it for granted because you know what it cost you. The tears, the prayers, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, all of that will make the fulfillment that much sweeter. And when you tell your story, it won't just be about the destination. It'll be about the journey. It'll be about the patience you learned, the strength you found, the faith you developed. And what about when you feel like you've been delayed longer than others? It's tempting to look around and compare, to see someone else succeed quickly and wonder why you're still in the same place. But comparison kills purpose. Their timeline isn't yours. Their race isn't yours. God's plan for your life is uniquely tailored to who you are and what you're called to do. Trust that He hasn't forgotten you. Trust that your time will come, and when it does, it will be exactly right. It's also important to remember that delay is not passive. Waiting well is not about sitting still and doing nothing. It's about preparation. It's about becoming. It's about doing what you can with what you have while trusting God with what's next. Keep showing up. Keep being faithful. Keep sharpening your skills, building your character, nurturing your faith. The waiting season is not a wasted season. It's a working season. Even when it looks like nothing is happening, something is shifting in the spirit. God's promises are not fragile. They are not weakened by time. What He spoke over your life is still active, still alive, still in motion. And when the time is right, when all the pieces come together in ways you couldn't have orchestrated, what once looked like delay will be seen as divine design. The door will open, the answer will come, the breakthrough will happen, not because you forced it, but because you trusted through the delay. And while you wait, trust is the key. Trust that God knows what He's doing. Trust that He sees what you can't. Trust that what's delayed is not denied, and that the waiting is never wasted, because even in the silence, He's still speaking. Even in the pause, He's still preparing. And even in the delay, His promise still stands. Your struggle is proof you're still in the fight. It's a truth most people overlook, because when life gets heavy, when the weight feels unbearable, and the darkness closes in, we tend to think something is wrong with us. We mistake the battle as a sign of weakness, as though struggling somehow means we've already lost. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Struggle doesn't mean you're defeated. It means you're still swinging. You're still trying, you haven't given up. Struggle is a sign of life. Dead things don't fight. Dead dreams don't resist. When you're numb, you don't feel anything. But when you're alive, when there's still a spark in your soul, the fight is real. You may be tired, you may be wounded, but if you're still pushing, still praying, still holding on when it would be easier to quit, that's proof of your strength, not your failure. It's the very evidence that you're still in the ring. There's a lie that life should be smooth if you're doing things right, that the path should be easy, the doors should open, and the success should come quickly. But real growth, real purpose, real transformation, none of that comes without resistance. Athletes don't get stronger without straining their muscles. Musicians don't master their craft without hours of grueling practice. And people don't develop true resilience without walking through fire. Struggle isn't the enemy, it's the process. There are days when the struggle feels like it's too much. The doubts creep in, the tears come when no one's watching, and the silence from heaven is deafening. You ask yourself if it's even worth it, but the very fact that you're still asking means you haven't surrendered to despair. You're still in motion. You're still connected to the fight, even if it feels like you're losing. That ache inside you, the one that says there's more, that whispers keep going, even when your strength is gone, that's the voice of purpose. It's the sound of someone who hasn't quit. The enemy of your soul wants you to equate struggle with failure. He wants you to believe that if it's hard, it must not be meant for you. But the truth is, The struggle is often confirmation that you're on the right path. If you weren't a threat, you wouldn't face resistance. If your calling wasn't significant, you wouldn't be under attack. The greater the purpose, the greater the pressure, and pressure creates power. Your struggle is shaping you. It's stretching parts of you that comfort never could. It's teaching you how to be patient in chaos, how to stay rooted when the ground shakes, how to hold on to faith when fear is louder. Every sleepless night, every unanswered prayer, every disappointment that didn't break you, it's all part of your training. You are becoming someone who can handle more, carry more, lead more, and none of it would be possible without the struggle. There are people who won't understand your fight. They'll look at you from the outside and think you're fine. They won't see the battles in your mind, the weight on your shoulders, the heaviness in your heart. But that's okay. They don't need to see it. You're not fighting for their approval. You're fighting for your life, your future, your purpose. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply get out of bed, take one more step, breathe through one more minute. The world tells you that if you're struggling, you're doing something wrong. But heaven says if you're struggling, you're growing. You're not broken. You're being rebuilt. And rebuilding is messy. It takes time, it takes tears, it takes endurance, but the outcome is a version of you that's unshakable. Someone who doesn't crumble under pressure, someone who's learned to lean on something deeper than just strength, someone who's learned to walk in grace. Your struggle is personal, but it's also universal. Everyone is fighting something. Everyone is carrying something they don't talk about. And the more honest we are about our struggles, the more we create space for others to do the same. When you keep going, even when it's hard, you give someone else permission to do the same. Your perseverance becomes someone else's hope. Your story becomes someone else's survival guide. Don't wait for the struggle to end before you start seeing its value. Sometimes the lesson is in the middle of the mess. You may not have the answers, you may not have clarity, but what you do have is courage. You're showing up, you're doing the best you can, and that's enough. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You just have to be present. There's something sacred about struggle. It brings you to the end of yourself, and that's where transformation begins. It strips away your pride, your plans, your illusions of control. It brings you face to face with your limitations, and then points you towards something greater. That's where faith grows. That's where character is refined. That's where you learn that strength isn't just about muscles. It's about spirit. It's about staying when everything in you wants to leave. It's about believing when everything around you says it's over. You may not feel strong, but strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It looks like showing up to work when your heart is breaking. It looks like raising your kids when you're running on empty. It looks like praying when you don't hear a response. That's the kind of strength that changes lives. That's the kind of strength that builds legacies. You are not weak because you struggle. You are not failing because you're tired. You are not behind because the road is longer than you expected. You're in the middle of the fight, and that alone is victory. You're still here, still breathing, still hoping, and that matters more than you know. So when the struggle feels unbearable, remind yourself it's not proof of failure. It's proof of fight. It means you still care. It means your story isn't over. It means you've got more inside you than you thought. And no matter how hard it gets, as long as you're still fighting, there is still a way forward. You're still in the process. And the process is what prepares you for the promise. So in the end, your struggle is not a sign of weakness. It's evidence that you haven't given up. It's the mark of someone who's still reaching, still believing, still fighting for something greater. You may not have all the answers. You may be tired, wounded, or walking through shadows. But the fact that you're still moving forward speaks louder than any defeat ever could. The pressure you feel isn't the end, it's the making of you. Keep going, not because it's easy, but because what's ahead is worth everything you're pushing through. You're not losing, you're lasting, and sometimes lasting is the greatest victory of all. Your struggle is proof you're still in the fight, and that alone is powerful. Every step you take, every tear you shed, every moment you choose not to quit is shaping something greater inside you. The pain you feel is not the end of your story. It's the tension before the breakthrough. Struggle doesn't mean you've lost. It means you're alive, growing, and still standing. And as long as you're still standing, there's still purpose, still promise, and still time. Hold on. What you're fighting through now is building the strength you'll need for where you're going next. Keep fighting, because your story is far from over, ladies and gentlemen. You see, when a woman has been wronged, lied to, betrayed, silenced, that pain doesn't go unnoticed, not by the world, not by her spirit, and definitely not by God, because the truth is, when everybody walks out on her, God steps in. When her heart is shattered into 1,000 pieces, God starts building something new with every single one of them. Now you may not see angels flapping their wings, you may not hear the thunder crack the sky, but listen to me, her strength, that quiet, unshakable power that keeps her standing, that ain't just her. That's God standing with her, God standing in her, God standing for her. The doors that slammed in her face, that was God saying, "Not that way, my daughter. I got something better." The silence she heard when she cried in the dark, that wasn't absence, that was preparation. People will try to crush her, but God will use that pressure to crown her. People will try to erase her, but God will write her name in places they'll never reach. See, when God stands with a woman who's been wronged, she doesn't come back the same. She comes back wiser. She comes back softer, but stronger. She comes back with fire in her eyes and peace in her heart. You can't break her, because she was rebuilt by God himself. So to the woman who was lied to, cheated on, laughed at, left behind, you are not finished. You are not forgotten. You are being fortified. Let them talk, let them doubt, because the same people who threw dirt on your name, they're going to have to watch you bloom from that same ground. God is standing with you, and when God stands with you, who can stand against you? Pain has a way of making us feel forgotten. When betrayal stings or heartbreak sinks into the deepest part of a woman's soul, the silence that follows can feel deafening. It's in those moments, when the phone doesn't ring, when friends disappear, when tears hit the pillow night after night, that it feels like God is nowhere to be found. But that feeling, that silence, is not absence. It is the sacred ground where God begins to speak in whispers instead of thunder. God does not abandon the broken. In fact, the broken are often where he begins his greatest work. Look at the stories written across Scripture. Time and time again, it's the outcast, the wounded, the betrayed, the forgotten who receive his most profound attention. He never passed by the woman at the well. He never ignored the woman caught in sin. He never looked away from the one who pressed through the crowd with trembling hands just to touch the hem of his robe. If anything, he stopped, he turned, and he saw them. There is something holy about being broken, something the world doesn't recognize but God treasures. When everything else has been stripped away, when there's no pretense left, and your hands are too tired to fight, you're finally in a place where God can meet you without resistance. When you are at your lowest, when your soul is cracked open, and your pride has fallen, that is where grace rushes in. He doesn't rush healing. He doesn't throw quick fixes or surface-level comfort. Instead, he comes close, closer than ever. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." That's not just poetic language, that's a promise, a divine truth that God leans into pain with compassion, not distance. When a woman has been wrong, lied to, manipulated, abandoned, she starts to question everything. Was it her fault? Why didn't God stop it? Why didn't he intervene sooner? And here's the hardest truth of all. Sometimes God allows pain to shape us because he sees beyond what we can understand in the moment. He doesn't cause evil, but he does repurpose it. He doesn't abandon us to it. He walks through it with us. We only think he's gone because we're looking for a different kind of presence, but God isn't always in the firestorm. Sometimes He's in the still small voice that shows up when the world goes quiet, and he remembers. Every tear shed in secret is seen. Every silent scream that never left your lips is heard. Every time you felt unseen or unloved, God stood in the room with you, heart breaking with yours. The brokenness you carry doesn't make you less to him. It doesn't disqualify you. If anything, it's an invitation to lean in, to trust deeper, to be rebuilt from the inside out. God doesn't choose perfect people. He chooses the ones who have been shattered, so he can put the pieces back together in a way that reflects his glory. If your heart has been broken, it means you've loved deeply. If your spirit feels crushed, it means you've fought battles many will never understand. And in that, God sees beauty. He sees the moments no one else saw. When you stayed strong for others while crumbling on the inside. When you forgave what others said was unforgivable. When you kept moving forward, even with wounds that hadn't fully healed. He doesn't abandon women like that. He covers them, he lifts them, he anoints them. God has a way of redeeming the pain we thought would break us forever. What felt like the end is often just a beginning we couldn't see yet. And he doesn't just restore what was lost. He brings back more peace, more clarity, more confidence, a deeper awareness of his voice, a fiercer understanding of your worth. The heartbreak becomes the soil for rebirth. Think of the woman who was bleeding for 12 years. She had been overlooked, outcast, judged, but one touch from Jesus reversed it all. It wasn't just about physical healing. It was about him stopping everything to acknowledge her, to say, I see you. I know what you've been through. You are not invisible. That's what he does. That's who he is. He notices the women no one else sees. He hears the cries no one else hears. He restores what no one else can restore. Even in your most isolated moment, you were never alone. Even in your anger, confusion, or doubt, God remained. He was steady. He was patient. He waited while you wrestled with the questions. He didn't punish you for your pain. He sat with it. He held space for your healing. Sometimes healing looks like quiet mornings when you realize the pain has finally loosened its grip. Sometimes it looks like strength you didn't know you had, showing up in small, everyday ways. Sometimes it looks like finally being able to talk about the past without trembling. That's God. That's his hand, gently, faithfully, bringing you back to life. You may carry scars, but they are not signs of defeat. They are marks of survival. They are proof that what tried to destroy you did not succeed. God stayed. When others walked away, he remained. When you were blamed, when you were misunderstood, when you were told to stay quiet, God was already working behind the scenes, moving, shifting, preparing. You see, God doesn't promise a life without brokenness, but he promises we won't walk through it alone. He doesn't promise we won't feel abandoned, but he promises we never truly are, and he certainly doesn't forget those who've been wronged. On the contrary, he becomes their defender, their restorer, their safe place. What was taken from you, he saw it. What was done in secret, he knows, and he will deal with it, justly, righteously, and in his perfect timing. The enemy wants you to believe the pain means it's over, that you're too far gone, that you've been disqualified from peace or love or a future, but God's word says the exact opposite. He is near to the broken-hearted. That's not metaphor. That's not exaggeration. That is his character. He draws near when others draw back. He speaks when the world goes silent. He restores when all seems ruined. He lifts up those who are bowed low. You may feel broken, but you are not abandoned. Not for a moment. There's a quiet kind of strength that lives inside a woman who has been broken, but refuses to stay that way. It's the kind of strength that the world misreads, thinking she's just tough, thinking she's just built differently, thinking she just doesn't feel the weight like everyone else. But the truth is, she feels it deeply. She feels the pain, the betrayal, the exhaustion of fighting battles no one else sees, and yet she keeps going, that strength, that endurance, that courage that seems to rise again and again when everything else falls apart. That strength is not hers alone. It comes from something greater, something eternal, something divine, because no one walks through fire that hot and comes out glowing unless they've been held together by something supernatural. A woman who's been wronged and still chooses love. That's not just personality, that's God's hand holding her heart in place. A woman who's been left behind and still chooses to rise with grace instead of bitterness. That's not just willpower, that's God breathing life into her lungs when she forgot how to inhale. People often admire her, sometimes even envy her, wondering how she keeps her head up, how she doesn't break down, how she still has softness left in her soul. But they don't see the divine reinforcements behind the scenes. They don't see the prayers whispered through clenched teeth. They don't see the nights she collapsed on the floor asking God to take the pain away. They don't hear the silent screams or witness the spiritual battles fought in solitude. All they see is the comeback, the smile, the way she shows up again whole, or at least healing. After the world tried to break her apart, her strength is borrowed. It's sustained by grace, by a God who refuses to let her be destroyed by what was meant for her downfall. There's something sacred about divine endurance. It's not about pretending to be okay. It's not about acting unbothered. It's about being held up by something deeper than logic, because her strength doesn't always make sense. It defies circumstance. It appears when it should have run dry. It keeps her standing when everything around her screams that she should have crumbled. She might look composed on the outside, but what's happening on the inside is a constant flow of mercy, a daily renewal of power she didn't create. Isaiah 40:29 says, "He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak." That's her, the weary, the tired, the misunderstood, the dismissed, and yet somehow her power increases, not because she's special in the way people think, but because she's connected to the source. She's learned through suffering where to turn when her own strength runs out. Some days she doesn't feel strong at all. She wakes up carrying yesterday's pain. She smiles through conversations even though she's unraveling inside. She encourages others while silently praying for someone to notice her own need. But still she moves forward. That's not denial. That's grace. That's resilience rooted in faith, not pride. She walks not because the path is easy, but because God gives her the legs to move when she has every reason to sit down and quit. It's important to understand that her strength didn't come out of nowhere. It was forged in fire, molded through disappointment. She wasn't born with it. She became it. Through betrayal, she learned discernment. Through heartbreak, she learned wholeness. Through isolation, she learned to hear God's voice more clearly. And through injustice, she found the courage to stand, not just for herself, but for others who couldn't. That kind of strength can't be faked. It comes with a cost, but God doesn't let the price go unpaid. He repays it with purpose. What some people see as stubbornness is really the spirit of a warrior who's been through too much to let go now. She's not stubborn. She's standing firm. And even when her knees are shaking, she's not standing alone. God surrounds her like a fortress. He whispers to her when the voices of doubt get too loud. He reminds her who she is when the lies start to sound familiar. And even when she questions everything, even when she's angry, confused, or numb, he stays. His strength doesn't waver when hers does. His faithfulness isn't tied to her mood. He's constant, unshaken, unchanging. Her story might not have had a fair beginning. She may have been wronged in ways no one will ever fully understand. But God specializes in rewriting painful narratives into testimonies of power. That's why her strength carries a weight to it. It's not performative. It's redemptive. It's the kind of strength that doesn't just help her survive. It transforms the environment around her. Others draw from it. Others find light in it. Because God's power flowing through one person can set entire rooms free. She may not know it, but her presence is healing, her endurance is inspiring, and her vulnerability, her decision to keep showing up with her scars, is part of what gives other women permission to heal too. That's what happens when God strengthens someone. The impact ripples. The overflow touches lives she didn't even know she was meant to reach. Her pain, once a weapon against her, becomes a bridge for someone else's breakthrough. This is what happens when her strength is not hers alone. She becomes a living vessel for God's power. She becomes evidence that weakness is not the end, that brokenness is not disqualification, that the woman people thought would fall apart forever can rise again, not bitter, but better, not harder, but wiser, and with a heart more open to purpose than ever before. There's nothing ordinary about this strength. It's heaven, breathed. It comes in quiet waves, in silent moments when no one's watching. It lifts her when she can't lift herself. It reminds her, again and again, that she doesn't have to carry everything alone, because her strength comes from the one who carried it all already, the one who understands suffering, the one who walked through betrayal, rejection, and pain, so that when she walks through it, she doesn't have to do it alone. She is not surviving by accident. She is standing because grace won't let her fall. Every step forward is a testament to divine support. Every time she gets up again, it's not just resilience, it's resurrection. Not her strength alone, but His working through her, carrying her, refusing to let her give up, even when she wants to, and that's why she's still here. There are moments in life when injustice strikes so deep, it shakes the foundation of everything you believe. When you've been wronged, betrayed, lied about, mistreated, and pushed aside, there's an ache that rises not just from the pain, but from the silence that follows. You look around and wonder, where is the justice in all of this? You cry out for answers. You seek accountability. You hope that those who hurt you will feel even a fraction of what they've made you carry. And yet sometimes it feels like the wicked walk free, while the innocent are left bleeding. That's when you must remember a truth that doesn't always scream, but never stops speaking. Justice belongs to God, not to man, not to the systems of this world, not to the court of public opinion, not even to your own desire for revenge. Justice is God's, and He handles it in His time, in His way, and with a precision that no human hand could ever achieve. That doesn't mean He's blind to what's happened to you. On the contrary, He sees every injustice, every false accusation, every abusive word, every manipulative act, every silent betrayal. He sees it all, and He takes it personally. It's easy to believe in justice when everything is fair. But what about when you were loyal and they lied? When you gave your all and they left without warning? When you protected someone who turned around and used your kindness as a weapon? Those are the moments that test your faith, not just in people, but in God Himself. Because if He is all-powerful and all-knowing, why didn't He stop it? Why didn't He step in before the damage was done? Why does it seem like the ones who caused the most harm are the ones thriving, while you're left putting the pieces of your soul back together? God is not blind, and He is never late. His justice doesn't move on our schedule, but that doesn't mean it's not moving. He isn't in a hurry like we are, because His justice is eternal. It doesn't fade. It doesn't miss. It doesn't leave anything unresolved. What may seem like a delay is often divine strategy. What may feel like silence is actually preparation. He is working behind the scenes in ways we can't see, orchestrating redemption, setting things right, bringing clarity, exposing lies, and elevating truth in a way that can't be denied when the time comes. There's a reason Romans 12:19 says, "Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, 'It is mine to avenge, I will repay,' says the Lord. That isn't a suggestion, it's a declaration. God is not asking you to forget what happened. He's asking you to release it into hands more capable than your own, because when we try to handle justice ourselves, we often do it through bitterness, anger, or fear. But when God steps in, He handles it with truth, righteousness, and mercy. He knows the whole story. He knows the motive behind every action. He knows the pain they caused and the lies they told. Nothing is hidden from Him, and nothing escapes His judgment. That should bring comfort, not fear, because it means you don't have to carry the burden of trying to make things right on your own. You don't have to fight battles that were never yours to fight. You don't have to exhaust yourself seeking payback when peace is already promised to you. God sees the wrong, and He will make it right. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but He will. And when He does, it won't just be about punishing someone else. It will be about restoring you. Restoration is a form of justice. It's not just about seeing the one who hurt you fall. It's about watching God raise you up in spite of them. It's about healing that confuses your enemies. It's about walking in peace while those who hurt you remain tangled in the consequences of their own choices. It's about joy returning to your heart, not because they apologized, but because God lifted the weight off your shoulders and carried you into something better. Sometimes God doesn't bring justice the way we expect, because His justice isn't driven by ego, it's driven by love and truth. He disciplines, but He also redeems. He exposes, but He also transforms. And yes, sometimes He lets people sit in the mess they created until they finally face the damage they caused. But He also works to ensure that your healing is not dependent on their downfall. Because real justice isn't just external, it's internal. It's peace in your mind, it's clarity in your soul. It's knowing you're no longer defined by what they did to you. There will be moments when you're tempted to speak out, to defend yourself, to try and force the truth into the light. But if God tells you to be still, it's not because He wants you to be silent forever. It's because He's handling what you can't. Being still doesn't mean being passive. It means trusting that the truth will rise, even when lies seem louder. It means having the maturity to say, I don't need to win this moment, because God is writing the ending. And when He writes the ending, no one can rewrite it. That's the power of divine justice. It doesn't just end chapters, it writes better ones. It restores dignity. It restores hope. It restores the woman who thought she would never smile again. And it does so without needing revenge to prove a point. God's justice is complete. It reaches beyond the surface. It heals what people never even apologized for. It redefines your story so that the thing meant to destroy you becomes the thing that sets you apart. God is not indifferent to your pain. He is not slow in keeping His promises. He is patient, strategic, and unfailing. And when He brings justice, it's not to prove who was wrong. It's to reveal who you really are. It's to remind you that you were never forgotten, that your value was never tied to how they treated you, that your destiny is not delayed by what they did. He steps in at the perfect time, and when He does, it won't just be justice. It will be vindication wrapped in peace. You may not see the full picture yet. You may not understand why it happened the way it did, but know this, nothing is wasted, no pain, no tear, no sleepless night. God collects every piece and uses it as evidence when the time comes, and when He moves, you won't have to announce it. You won't have to shout, look what God did. Everyone will see it, everyone will know. Justice doesn't need a spotlight, it shines on its own. Betrayal has a sting that's unlike any other wound. It doesn't just hurt, it confuses, it shocks, it disorients. It doesn't come from strangers, it comes from those you trusted, those you confided in, those you never thought would twist a knife when your back was turned. It leaves you questioning everything, your judgment, your worth, your place in the world. And in the quiet aftermath, when the betrayal has done its damage and everyone else has moved on, you're left to rebuild from the inside out. But what no one tells you in that moment, what often goes unseen in the wreckage of betrayal, is that elevation is waiting on the other side. It's a hidden pattern woven through the lives of those God calls, those he chooses to use in ways that defy the natural order. Before the crown comes the cross, before the platform comes the pit, before the reward comes the rejection. It's not just poetic, it's prophetic, because betrayal has a way of pushing you out of the place that was too small for the destiny on your life. It hurts, yes, but sometimes it's the only way God can separate you from what was limiting you. The betrayal you didn't see coming often becomes the very vehicle that carries you into your next level. Look at Joseph, sold by his own brothers, betrayed not by enemies but by blood, tossed in a pit, left to die, and later imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. But through every twist of injustice, something bigger was happening. Every step of rejection was a step closer to elevation. By the time Joseph stood before Pharaoh, second only to the king himself, he didn't just hold power, he held perspective. He saw how every betrayal led him right into the position God had prepared for him all along. That's what betrayal does in the hands of God. It doesn't break you. It builds you. It sharpens your discernment. It deepens your faith. It detaches you from approval, so you stop seeking validation in people who were never meant to carry your calling. It burns away the false comfort of familiarity and forces you into the discomfort where transformation happens. It reminds you that you're not just being moved, you're being prepared. What feels like rejection is often redirection, not away from purpose but into it, because there are some places you never would have left unless you were pushed. There are some relationships you would have stayed in too long unless they showed their true colors. There are some environments you would have made permanent unless betrayal came in and broke what you were trying so hard to hold together. And once it breaks, you have no choice but to heal forward, to move, to grow, and in that movement elevation begins. God doesn't waste betrayal. He doesn't ignore it. He doesn't overlook your pain, but he uses it not because he enjoys your suffering, but because he sees what's coming. He sees what you can't, and so he allows certain betrayals not to punish you, but to propel you, to break the ceiling that you couldn't even see was above you, to close the doors you were too loyal to shut, to sever ties that were draining your spirit under the disguise of connection. It hurts, it's unfair, but it's necessary, and when the betrayal comes, it often comes right before your breakthrough. That's not coincidence. That's the enemy trying to discourage you at the edge of something new. He knows what you're about to step into, and if he can break your spirit now, maybe you won't walk into the next level. Maybe you'll shrink back. Maybe you'll become bitter, hardened, afraid to trust, afraid to love, afraid to rise again. But what he meant for harm, God is already repurposing for your good. There's a certain fire that betrayal ignites. Not a fire of rage or revenge, but of refinement. You start shedding what doesn't serve you. You start praying more honestly. You begin hearing God more clearly. Because betrayal has a way of stripping you down to your core, where everything false falls away, and all that's left is your raw, desperate reliance on the one who never left. That's when the elevation begins, not when you're standing tall, but when you're bowed low, surrendering the pain for purpose. People will see your elevation and think it came out of nowhere. They'll call you lucky. They'll say you're blessed. They won't know the sleepless nights, the silent tears, the gut-wrenching prayers. They won't know how close you came to giving up. They won't see the betrayal behind the breakthrough. But you will, and that's why you'll walk with a humility they can't imitate. Because your elevation cost you something. It came through heartbreak. It came through wounds. It came through a process that only God could sustain you through. And when God elevates you, he does it in such a way that even those who betrayed you can't deny it. Sometimes he doesn't vindicate you by proving them wrong. He vindicates you by blessing you. in full view of those who broke you, not to embarrass them, but to remind you that no one can block what he has already prepared for your life. Their betrayal didn't disqualify you, it qualified you. It became the soil from which your next season would grow. The beautiful thing about elevation is that it doesn't just lift your circumstances, it lifts your perspective. You stop needing closure, you stop needing apologies, you start realizing that peace is something you can carry even when people never made things right. You begin to see how all the pieces come together. The tears, the silence, the confusion. They weren't wasted. They were the evidence that something holy was happening beneath the surface. You may have lost people. You may have lost places you loved, but you didn't lose yourself. You found the version of you that was buried under compromise. You found the faith you didn't know you had. You discovered how strong you really are, not because of your strength, but because of God's strength in you. And now when you walk with authority. When you speak with clarity. When you rise with purpose. Betrayal is never the end of the story, not in the hands of a God who writes redemption into every chapter. It may feel like the end when you're in it. It may feel like the final word when the pain is fresh, but it's not. It's the turning point, the setup, the necessary breaking that leads to your becoming. And on the other side of it is a level you weren't ready for before, but now you are. Because you went through the fire and came out refined. You were buried, but you didn't stay down. You were broken, but not destroyed. And now you're not just rising, you're ascending, not because betrayal didn't happen, but because it did, and through it you found the God who lifts. So now you see, what was meant to break you was the very thing God used to build you. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the rejection, it wasn't the end. It was the door, and through it, God was preparing you for something greater, something higher, something more aligned with the purpose He placed in you from the beginning. Every tear was a seed, every silent night was a preparation, every moment you were overlooked was God setting the stage to elevate you in a way no one could deny. This wasn't just about pain, it was about transformation. You were never forsaken, you were being forged, and now you rise, not in bitterness, but in power, not in revenge, but in purpose, because when God stands with the woman who was wronged, no betrayal can hold her back, and no opposition can stop what He has already ordained. The elevation has come, not in spite of what you went through, but because of it, and now you're walking into everything they said you never would, with grace in your heart, fire in your soul, and God at your side.